There is no one single cause to male suicide, no matter what people say. Anyone that says differently is lying to you.
Suicide in England and Wales is 3 times more common among men than among women. The gap between sexes has increased over time.
Generally speaking, men don't open up as much as women. And I think that is a problem. I think it's important as well to encourage men to share their problems and emotions. So we need to help men find more meaning in their lives outside of work and money, to value family, friends, community, hobbies, themselves, not just valuing men purely on their bank account and their job or status.
What do we need to be doing at our age for the kids of now, the 5, the 10, even the 15-year-olds? What things that need to start changing so that those young lads won't turn into men of our age where the greatest risk to their life is suicide?
Too often people want like some sort of catchphrase or slogan, and none of them have any value here. It's really, really complicated, and a lot of it's quite difficult to have, and a lot of it we don't actually know. We're just trying our best because, like I said, there's very few people asking these questions, very few people looking into what are men's unique needs in therapy, because there's so few male therapists and there's so little compassion and empathy for men.
Hi George, welcome to the show today. Let's start just by learning a bit about, I guess, you and your purpose. So, yeah, tell me.
The big questions first. Well, thank you for having me. I guess my purpose, I feel like my purpose currently within the Tin Men is to fill in the missing gaps of the gender debate. So obviously we talk a lot about gender equality. Obviously a lot of that centers around women, if not all of it. And I've spent 5 years trying to fill in what I've seen as missing gaps around what I consider the ugly side of gender equality, which is the men and boys parts. But more broadly, I think one of the things that I'm trying to reduce is just too many men dying young, particularly from suicide, which is sadly too often the common denominator that sort of links together all the issues I talk about. So I've given you 2 purposes. So yeah, hard to pick one.
Yeah, I mean, I guess you mentioned suicide there. I think men are at, about 3 times the risk of suicide to women. Why do you think that is?
Well, no, there's no one single answer. A lot of people obviously want to talk about this sort of thing, especially on social media. Often it's used, male suicide is used as a sort of stick to hit men with, to blame them for being toxic or privileged or patriarchal, or, they need to just talk more, open up or cry. But there is no one single cause to male suicide, no matter what people say. Anyone that says differently is lying to you. The sad thing about suicide is that you'll learn this when you speak to suicidal men or bereaved families, is that there is no one cause. A lot of family left behind by men they've lost to suicide have no idea why their dad or brother or son, uncle, whoever else, friend, husband died by suicide. They don't know why. So lots of questions left behind. So it's very frustrating to see sort of Instagram, social media know-it-alls claiming to have the answer, especially when it's one single answer. I don't know. I mean, most men who are suicidal don't consider themselves having a mental health problem. That's probably the big one. A lot of people consider male suicide to be in here, like some sort of chemical imbalance to be medicated or talked away, when in reality, most men, like I said, don't. Most men who are suicidal don't think they have a mental health problem. They'll have a job problem or financial problem or a problem at home or problem with the family. Maybe a lot of it's down to child custody battles. A lot of it's down to debt. A lot of it's down to physical disability, family courts, divorce. There's so many different things, and often it's a multitude of things all combined together. So no one single cause, I'm afraid. No soundbite from me. It's a very complicated thing that sadly there's not enough research going into it. We know loneliness is involved. We know addiction's involved. We know that it is moderated by mental health for sure. But beyond that, there's too many question marks, especially when it's the biggest risk to my life and your life and every man's life up to 50 and perhaps even beyond that. So massive problem, too many unanswered questions, and too many people acting like they have the answer on social media,
when in fact we don't, because probably every case is completely unique.
Yes.
But
yeah,
one, I guess, common denominator is that it does seem to affect men more than women.
Yeah.
But yeah, women also get into debt. They also have trouble at work. They also come with some of those. So what do you think it is to do with men? I mean, one thing that pops to mind is men probably aren't as good at talking, but
Mhm.
I mean,
It's
why is that as a starting point? I guess.
well, men are about 3 or 4 times more likely to end their life by suicide than women. So you're absolutely right. It is more of a male-based phenomenon, but it doesn't exclusively impact men. There are far too many women that do this as well. And I actually am starting now in my space, at least, starting to feel like we're not talking enough about suicide in women. Like the conversation of suicide is the next thing we'll talk about is men, when I feel like 1 in 4 is significant as well, and that's something I feel like I have to be a bit more accountable for. But it's a good question. Like, obviously, women get into debt, get divorces. I mean, the divorce one is often down to child custody battles, and those people who've gone through family courts know that it's more often the mother that gets the child. So, although mothers and fathers do fight for custody, it's more often mothers. So, if there's a suicide related to child custody battles, it makes sense that it's more often impacting men. Same with jobs and debt. I think men take on more of the financial responsibility in relationships and family life. They have higher expectations. One of the things I talked to my male suicide researcher friend Susie Bennett about, she talks about how men aren't allowed to fail to the same extent women are. Like women, and it's in some ways quite misogynistic. We expect women to fail often, but for men, we don't allow them to fail. So although women might go into debt, I don't necessarily think that has the same impact on a woman as it might on a man. That's not to say they handle it well, but I feel like there's an additional element in there too. You're right to say that men don't open up and share their emotions as often or as eloquently as most women do, although I feel like that's overblown. Studies have found that like 9 in 10 middle-aged men who did die by suicide did open up and did actually seek help, but they still ended their lives. So that's 9 in 10. So yeah, I feel like men don't open up enough, but that isn't a complete solution either. And I think even then, the services that I think men open up to or seek help from, so that mental health services, I question whether they're as effective on men as they are on women. That might help explain the disparity. But you're right, generally speaking, men don't open up as much as women. And I think that is a problem. Like, I think it's important as well to encourage men to share their problems and emotions, particularly with other men. But then also to recognize that isn't a silver bullet either. I mean, to put it into a visual metaphor, going again from one I use with Susie, the male suicide researcher, she talks about male suicide like a pot of boiling water on a stove. So imagine a pot of water is a man, and the water's inside, the lid is on, the heat is turned on, the water's boiling up, pressure's building inside. As the pressure increases, you arrive at a suicidal event. So men talking is the equivalent to taking off that lid. That obviously helps avoid the short-term risk of suicide. It helps the boiling come down. It releases the pressure. It helps it breathe a little bit more. But ultimately, like any talking event, be it therapy or group work or just seeing a mate, lid has to go back on and the problem still persists. So it's very much a two-part problem. There's the talking bit, which is taking the lid off, but also turning off the heat. Like, what is the thing that's causing that heat? And those are the different issues I talked about earlier, many of which I can't even begin to sort of explain. So it's a bit of both. It's not one particular thing, but you're right. Women do, the suicide rate in women is a lot lower than men's. And there's many reasons behind that too. But I think a lot of it's down to psychological interventions, perhaps being more geared to women than to men. And that's why men's talking groups, group therapy sessions, social prescriptions, particularly for men, are taking off all over the UK, especially. And I'm glad they are, because I think that has a massive positive impact on men's suicide rates.
Do you think there's a bit of almost like a starting point with men? And what I mean by that is the cultural expectation, the male pride that many of us have. And you said there about, you feel women are allowed to fail. Well, actually, I think a lot of men, we don't want to feel like we could fail. I don't want to fail. I want to provide for the family. I want to do this. And this is maybe something that traditionally happened 50, 100 years ago. The man went out to work, the woman stayed at home. The man knew his role. And we feel we've got to keep that stiff upper lip. We've got to keep it all together. We've got to be a provider. So are we starting at a point where we've already got pressure upon us? even if it made up pressure in our head, but it it's still there.
Yeah, I think that's reasonable. I mean, over the past 50 or so years, we've seen a wonderful renaissance of what it is to be a woman, where women have completely changed the idea of femininity to come out of home, away from childcare, no longer sort of confined to housekeeping responsibilities, entering the workplace. And like, it's been a wonderful, like I said, renaissance of what it is to be a woman, where they're basically been liberated from the traditional gender norms, although obviously an incomplete journey. But I don't think men have had the chance to do that. I think we still too often hold men to the archetypes of 50 years ago, as you said, the breadwinner role. And not only men holding themselves to that level, but others, so women included in that. I think society has a very wide and often toxic set of expectations for men that are increasingly difficult to meet, because obviously as women enter the workplace, which is quite right, that means the money has to be shared both ways. A man can no longer, very difficult for one man to support a whole family on one single salary and for his wife to be at home. So I think we need to change our perspectives of what it is to be a man. Both men and women do need to do that. So to alleviate men from this increasingly difficult to achieve meet level of expectations, like 40% of breadwinners are women now, which is an amazing journey over the past 20 or 30. That was like 1 or 2% in the 70s. Now it's 40%. So as that's happened, as we've learned to value women for things beyond being, great mums and housekeepers, we need to do the same for men. So we need to help men find more meaning in their lives outside of work and money, in the opposite way, really, to value family, friends, community, hobbies, themselves, not just valuing men purely on their bank account and their job or status.
Yeah, I've often seen it said, not to go back too far, but men and opening up and talking. Generally, when women get together, they sort of, sit opposite each other and things like that. When men get together, we do activities where we're sat side by side, whether that's watching sport or even traditionally, if people went to the pub, you'd sit at the bar. And perhaps that hasn't helped that initial conversation. But equally, you were mentioning that it's maybe hard for men to know what they're meant to do, what they're meant to be. Do you think? I mean, obviously, we've all watched Adolescence and things like that, and understanding. I think that's brought it to light what young men are going through, because there's clearly an issue there. But I don't know. I don't even know what my question is. Where does some of this stem from, and do things need to change? Because you actually rightly pointed out there's been a massive change in how women are seen in society and how they can move and go into work, and all of this has been positive. Do we now need to have that same conversation for men?
Yeah, especially around things like fatherhood. One of the things I think a lot of men find a huge amount of satisfaction, happiness and meaning out of is being a great dad. And yet too often we don't seem to value men as fathers, or fathers in general, or certainly not to an equal level as we do mothers. So helping men, like I said, helping men broaden their horizons and find meaning in new areas of life, like women have, is essential if we're going to help them, survive and mitigate this crisis of male suicide. That a lot of it, I think, is born out of purposelessness and isolation. There's so many different things intersecting. It's impossible to pick one, but isolation, loneliness, fears of failure, all the different systemic and structural problems I mentioned, a lack of social networks and support groups, and like you said, like a new approach to therapy that I think is more in line of what men need. So if you go and see a therapist, 80% of the time you're going to be speaking to a woman, and you're going to be in a clinical environment, and you're going to be sat opposite her a little bit like we are now. A lot of men don't want face-to-face time. They want what's called shoulder-to-shoulder time, or side-by-side time, which is as you described, where men are side-by-side working together, often in group activities, doing something physical like a dog walk or going for a drive or sat at the pub. And that's where it comes back to what I said about social prescription. Social prescription is a new sort of innovative approach to suicide intervention, especially, that doesn't give you like a medical prescription, a drug or whatever. Like it will give you a social prescription. So they'll send you to a workshop to work with other men mending toys, or they'll send you on a hiking group to walk up a mountain, or send you to an allotment to garden, or a boxing group if you're a young man, or walking, cycling. Like who knows? It's so many different things, and they have such a massive positive benefit on men. A lot of it just because it's like men spending time with other men, but also they seem to leverage and make the most of the fact that men, generally speaking, prefer to speak in groups. They prefer to have like no hierarchy, like a flat hierarchy rather than therapist and client. They like to model their talk on other men, so they want to see another man talk maybe a few weeks before they'll step in and talk, and they want that sense of camaraderie and the fact that that man said the thing that I'm going through, which means that I'm not alone in experiencing that. So group talk groups for men, extremely powerful. Not enough of them, although more and more opening every single day. A lot of them are just groups that are set up by and for men, because the health services in this country have absolutely failed men, including and women, but especially men. And the explosion and proliferation of men's groups really does also highlight the absolute failure of health service in actually giving men what they need. So yeah, I'm really happy to see all these new groups for men to talk that are harnessing the power of social prescription in the more side-by-side time. Like even if you go for a talk with a man, if you set a man down and spoke to him face to face and told him to tell you what's upsetting you, you probably get very little from him. But you take that same man, go for a walk, take the dogs out, or a bike ride, or even just drive a car, or go and cook a dinner together, you'll get a very different result to the same question. And we need to really take that seriously, because I don't think men and women have the exact same needs. And there's also lots of women that contact me saying, I want to go on the hiking group, I want to do the DIY, I want allotment. And I'm like, good. And I support that too. But generally speaking, it's more men that need that than women.
Yeah, I mean, you made a really important point there, because actually it's very easy when talking about men's needs that people think that this is to the detriment of women's needs. But actually it's not. What we're saying is everyone has these needs, and it's working out what works for, I guess, each sex.
Yeah. I mean, it's trying to do two things at once. Just one hand, you're saying men and women aren't the same and they have different needs, generally speaking. But at the same time, you're trying to say, but then also there's an overlap. A lot of women feel the same way, and a lot of women want these solutions. But we're talking on average, and the distributions are overlapping. They're not over here and over here. They're combined. So, speaking on average, men do have different needs to women, but that doesn't necessarily mean that some women don't have those needs, and that doesn't mean that some men don't have women's needs. Like it's very blurry and vague. And like I said from my first, I mean, the problem with me in podcast is that there's very few simple answers. I'll often give you a long diatribe, and it's very difficult to get anything out of it. But yeah, no simple answers to suicide or men's and women's needs. There's a lot of complexity in there.
Yeah, I guess that's a key point, that actually we can look at generalization and we can look at, the larger percentage, but there's always going to be cases where actually something doesn't work for one and another. And that's why it's so nuanced, and why it's maybe such a complicated subject to one, talk about, but equally solve as well.
Yeah, and that's why, I mean, I always encourage people to if you're not willing to have these lengthy conversations, then this isn't an area of advocacy that's suitable for you. I mean, too often people want like some sort of catchphrase or slogan, and none of them have any value here. It's really, really complicated, and a lot of it's quite difficult to have. And a lot of it we don't actually know. We're just trying our best because, like I said, there's very few people asking these questions, very few people looking into what are men's unique needs in therapy, because there's so few male therapists and there's so little compassion and empathy for men. So a lot of it's not guesswork, but it's people just trying their best to move the needle a little bit. I mean, I'm not a therapist. I don't have any qualifications in psychology whatsoever, but I'm just trying my best to fill in the gaps and acknowledging the fact that I don't know for sure. I don't have any solid answers myself either.
No, I mean, you're saying about the majority of therapists being female, but equally, I've recently heard, and it's gone up, the majority of primary school teachers are female. Do you think actually young lads need to be able to talk to other role models at that early age, especially where there's maybe not a father at home as well?
Yeah, I think I think men being role models to boys is just as important as women being role models to young girls. And so often there are no male role models for that boy. So just looking at the numbers, about a quarter of boys in households have no male sort of father, permanent male role model at home, like as a stepdad or biological dad. And then of those, about 20% won't have but so 80% of them won't have a male teacher at school. So about 80% of teachers are women. About 1 in 4 schools in the UK have no male teachers in it whatsoever. So there's a massive lack of positive male role models at home or at school for boys, and that leaves them looking elsewhere, and often in more nefarious areas to those that are willing to exploit them. And that's obviously where people talk about Andrew Tate or gangs or others that do sort of try and bring the boys onto their side. I think there is just a lack of role modeling for boys, and that includes school, and that's more broad as well. I think that's a systemic problem that we know. Well, we don't know that but I know and often tell people that boys are behind in school. A massive problem in the whole Western world, but boys are behind in every level of education in the whole entire Western world, with a few exceptions. And I think a lot of that is down to the same phenomenon we see in therapy spaces, where education is dominated by women, and I'm not doing it intentionally, but I think that leads to learning styles and learning environments that are more tailored to girls' needs, which explains, at least in part, why girls are doing so much better than boys at school. Like, no child wants to sit for 4 or 5 hours every day quietly reading, but that harms girls too, but I feel like that harms boys even more. I mean, I was one of those boys. I hated school. And I think the education style is more geared towards girls than boys, in the same way that therapy is perhaps more geared towards women and their needs than it is to men's.
Yeah, I guess, like you say, there hasn't been a deliberate setup. It's just the way that things have developed, and exactly like you say there. If you look at, you mentioned it there, sitting in a classroom for a long period of time, being still, reading and things like that. Again, we're describing a percentage, but that the higher percentage is that describes a more female trait than a young boy who actually is bouncing off the walls a bit more. So yeah, the education system isn't set up necessarily for young
No,
lads.
I mean, like I said, it fails everyone. The education system is pretty dreadful across the board, but I think it's even worse for boys. And especially when there are so few male teachers in classrooms, I think men are more able to recognise a boy's bad behaviour for what it is, rather than problematizing it. I was quite naughty in school, but only because I was so bored and disengaged. And it was only the male teachers that I seemed to get along best with, because I think they were able to recognise that George isn't an idiot. He isn't actually a bad boy, but he's just bored. He's disengaged. He doesn't want to sit here for 5 hours. He wants to run around like most teenage boys do. And I feel that's why it's important to have more men in classrooms. I don't think that's because women as teachers don't care, but I just think, generally speaking, they don't see it in the same way as men often do. And there's data, very unpopular data, but there's data that shows that girls are graded more favorably than boys of the same cognitive ability, meaning a boy and a girl of the same intelligence, the girls graded higher in teacher assessments. And we saw it play out during COVID, where obviously exams were cancelled across the board in the UK, all of them. So grades are based on teacher assessments. So we're moving from exams, which are more or less an objective measure of intelligence, towards teacher assessments, which are subjective. It's all about how she often assesses that child. And the gap widened even more. So over COVID, girls went even further ahead. And when it went back to exams, they came back, still ahead, but even further ahead, and then back to being just still the normal amount. So there's loads of great evidence. The OECD have done another study across, I think maybe 60 different countries, and they found that teachers grade girls higher for the same intelligence as boys. And a lot of that's down to what they say is non-cognitive abilities, which is behavior. They think boys are misbehaving, they don't listen, and that's probably true. Like I was one of those boys, but I think we need to start accepting that a lot of those boys are just bored. And a lot of those boys are being failed by us, meaning education. It's not boys failing school, it's school failing boys. So a lot of missing conversations, and there's too many to cover, to be honest. And I really wish there were more people doing it, because I'm not perfect. I'll make mistakes eventually. And that's the sad thing. Very few people know what's happening in education. Very few people, I think about 90% of people in the UK don't even realise that boys are so far behind in school. Often people think it's the opposite, that girls are behind, but that's not true and hasn't been true for about 35 years. Yeah.
I hope you're enjoying this episode. Wherever you're watching or listening, please do like and subscribe. It really would mean the world to me. Yeah, I mean, you've mentioned there, you're starting to have this conversation and you're putting it out. And I know you've built up, over 60,000 followers on your Instagram talking about these, I guess, tough topics. And I say tough topics because you said there this is a controversial stat, but actually it is a statistic.
Yeah. Yeah, it's just like the annoying thing is, as a former feminist, we would speak often about how a workplace that's dominated by men, particularly at a director level, that workplace more often than not will create a working environment, working standards, hours, whatever else, even the air conditioning will be more favourable to men. Again, that's not intentional. It's just men work in a way that's more suitable for men. That's totally uncontroversial, rather mundane, common sense suggestion. But then if you take that exact same thing where you say, well, let's not talk about board directors, let's talk about classrooms, or let's talk about therapy spaces where that same 80-20 disparity exists but inverted, suddenly it's controversial to suggest that maybe women design a work environment that's favourable to other women or girls. And it's not, I want to underline it, not intentionally doing it, but I'm just acknowledging that women and men do not think or operate this in the same way, generally speaking. And that has secondary impact on those that are working within that space too. So yeah, it isn't controversial. I mean, I really ought to stop saying it is, because it just isn't. But there are there are controversial things to talk about, but I don't think education is one of them. We're talking about children, and I mean, like, we all deserve an equal education regardless of sex. That isn't controversial. But too often that isn't actually happening, and often it's boys that are being hurt the most. Especially, this is controversial, white boys. Working class white boys, they're the bottom of the ladder. So, I mean, and the top of the ladder, Asian women, Asian girls. So that flips everything on its head. We're told women of colour are the ones disadvantaged in education or society in general, yet they're at the top of the educational attainment ladder. White boys, who are, the patriarchy oppressor class, they're at the bottom. And by significant, really far at the bottom. So a lot of it flips your thinking on its head. And that's what I think is controversial, because it requires a level of bravery and admission that we don't know everything, we got it wrong, and we need to readjust our thinking a little bit.
I mean, do you think then that we have got this bias towards the way we see the world? And now maybe, like you say, there's some statistics and facts that are actually coming out which play against that. And as humans, we like patterns. We like what we like. We like what we know. And when someone challenges that, it feels a bit icky, doesn't it?
Yeah, especially in politics, especially in things that are so important as gender equality. A lot of people don't see gender equality as, a set of political beliefs, but as a fundamental part of their identity as a human being. It's woven into every facet of their life, like their work, their job, their friendship groups, their community. Their entire social circle is very much dependent on a set of political ideas. And if some or all of those political ideas are shown to be not the complete truth, it's a threat to their fundamental existence. It's like an existential crisis for that person. Like, I know people who would lose their jobs if they admitted to what I'm saying, because their jobs are predicated on what I'm saying being wrong. So I can totally see why people wouldn't want to entertain these ideas, especially when ego is involved and a lot of pride around these so-called feminist ideas that often are not true. And I can understand it's a bit like, it's like a sports team, isn't it? Like, people will support their sports team to the very end. My home team, Leicester, has been relegated, bottom of the league. So, but I'll still support them. Doesn't matter how poorly they do, doesn't matter how badly they perform, or what signings they make, I will support that team until I'm dead. But for politics, not the same. And we need to sort of vote with our feet rather than just, beating the other side at any cost and becoming entrenched in some sort of culture war, rather than looking at politics through an evidence-based, non-partisan point of view that is just separated from our emotions and our egos and our identity, so we can, as best as we can, operate in a way that is just objective and like combining ideas from both sides, left and right, to try and like a pick and mix. Really, you want a bit of everything. You don't want just the fizzy cola bottles. You want some of the strawberries and the cherries and the chocolate mice too. So, yeah.
Yeah, I guess it's very easy. I mean, you mentioned there, even within your social circle and things like that, that you almost put in a box politically. You know, if you've got one particular view, then that is automatically lined up with several other views. But almost like we should take it that actually, if you like one band, you know, in music, you can equally like a really good indie band and drum and bass.
Yeah.
You know, it's like,
Yeah,
it's
yeah.
fine. You don't have to be into one type of music. You can
Yeah.
spread across, and it can be the same with I guess your identity and your views and your political stance on certain topics.
Like
It's okay.
come back to the middle a little bit, a bit more moderate. Like it's the thing I like about being a moderate is that it's impossible to be too moderate. Like it's a wonderful thing to be able to take peace from both sides, although you're often vilified. Like they say, if you walk down the middle of the road, you get hit by both sides. But I like it in the middle. It allows me to take the best of both worlds, to learn from the best of both, and or at least listen to them. Like I'm not saying you have to adopt these ideas, but at least listen to them in good faith, or allow others to speak about them. Too often, it's not even about not wanting to agree, but not wanting that discussion to happen at all. And that is even more problematic and a massive part of the problem, and often harms oneself because it just alienates people from you even more than you already have. And also just like everything in moderation. Like I don't want people just to follow my account and base all of their political ideas off the Tin Men. I am just one voice in what I hope is a very crowded sort of arena of voices, many of which are giving you ideas. And like my mum always said, everything in moderation. She meant it in terms of, you know, diet, but the same is true for our political diet. Like, don't just follow me, follow a bit of everyone, and don't just accept everything I'm saying as the gospel truth. It's just one word in a massive, possibly complex story that I'm trying my best to sort of add to. So a bit of everything. And again, it's not your snappy, outrageous soundbite like most podcasts, but I think everything needs to calm down and be a little bit more reasonable, and or at least allow the conversations to happen that I'm trying to have without it being vilified and castigated as misogynistic or whatever else.
That's a really interesting point, because I think that's really key, that actually we can have differencing of opinions, but still actually have respect for each other's opinions. And, you know, we always know it, that the sort of the best politicians, or the politicians that have long careers, are ones who are respectful and actually understand other people's point of views, rather than just, I'm on this path and this is the way we're going. And actually we see this in podcasts. You know, I think This Is Politics and things like that. You know, you've got Rory and Alistair, both actually from different sides of the political side, but actually they get on really well as friends and can talk through topics. And I think maybe rather than positioning someone on this is their view, actually we should all get together and discuss different views, look at facts, to actually make the world better for everyone.
Yeah. I mean, both sides get that wrong, but I think that's particularly bad on the left. The left seem to be really, really entrenched in a certain set of ideas, and if you stray outside of that, even just a toe, you're an incel or whatever else. Yeah, absolutely. We need to be more tolerant. I mean, the word I like to use is called parrhesia, which is Greek for freedom of speech, but parrhesia is an additional level to that. It basically means to speak freely and then to apologize for so speaking. And that is my fundamental political identity, where I will say what I'm thinking, and if I'm wrong, I'll apologize. And that's basically how modern discourse should be, like to speak freely and apologize for so speaking. And that doesn't happen. Like, you're not even allowed to say things, even as a means of understanding them yourself. And I think, like, even ideas we don't like at all, we need to have those conversations out in the open so we can shine the light of public understanding and criticism onto it, rather than pushing it away and, you know, like I said, vilifying it. I don't think that helps anyone, least of all the people doing the vilification.
No, I agree. I have seen it where people have just asked a question and almost got knocked down for asking the question.
I have this guy, a friend of mine, who is just a wonderful, wonderful man. He's like another male suicide researcher. When he was a student, he tried to join a feminist society, And he went to the opening night. He told me about this. It's incredible. Opening night, and then the woman giving the opening speech was like, "There's a man in the audience. There's a man in the audience. We're not continuing till he's gone." And he was singled out and chucked out of the opening night. And like, I don't understand what that's achieving. It doesn't achieve anything. And often the radical feminist side at least, is so easily vilifying men that they hurt their own cause. Like, I am devoutly pro-choice for women. I'm a big believer in women's reproductive rights. Broke my heart to see women lose their rights in America a few years ago. And I think a lot of it's down to the pro-choice crowd being obsessed with blaming men. Men shouldn't be writing laws on women's bodies, and ignoring the fact that the average man in America has roughly similar views on abortion as the average woman. Like, they're equally pro-choice or pro-life. And by making everything about anti-man, if men could get abortions, they could do it at ATM machines and whatever nonsense. You're just halving your support by alienating men, including myself. And that's what I mean. It helps them least of all, because you're just dividing your support in half by more or less arbitrary means. So it really is a lose-lose for everyone. And I wish we would stop doing it.
Yeah, putting people into a block when in fact lots of people are already agreeing. I mean, I'm a dad of two young girls, and I've always said that my aim is to make sure they can grow up in a world where they can do whatever they want without the fact that them being girls is holding them back. That's what I want.
Well, I'm just literally looking at data right now. They've analysed hiring bias in AI algorithms. So a lot of jobs now are using AI to sort out CVs. Like, here's 100 CVs. I haven't got time to sort them. Give me the top 10 most preferred candidates. And they've tested, like, I think maybe 22 different AIs, all of them, like Grok, Claude, OpenAI, Google, Gemini, whatever. And all of them favor women now to quite a significant level, where two CVs equal ability, they're fake. One's just got a girl's name, one's got a boy's name. Every single AI LLM will give preference to the women. And then they were like, okay, let's test it again. Let's swap the names. So we'll call these ones the women's names. And then they gave it to the women again. So that's every single AI algorithm that's doing that to a significant level. And obviously AI is a lot of it's based on our data, our own hiring biases. So I would say you're right to have those concerns. And if you had a son, I would hope you'd have the same concerns. And those concerns are probably more well-founded than for your daughters. Like, the experience of boys has gone under the radar to the point that, like I said, AI doesn't favor them anymore. Hiring bias in general doesn't favor them anymore. Like, sexism in the workplace, a huge amount of work's been done for women and girls, but nothing has been done for men in women's fields, like male teachers, male therapists, male nannies, male nurses. Like, very little is done for that. Whereas women in engineering, science, physics, huge amount of success. Not enough, but huge amount of progress. So you're right that you're concerned for your daughter. Any dad would be, but I really wish more parents concerned about their sons, because that is a really, really important problem to get our head around.
To finish off today, we've spoken right at the start about the sort of suicide rates with men, and you mentioned, men our age. I mean, if you're 30, I'm mid 40s now, but that is my biggest risk. What do we need to be doing at our age for the kids of now, the 5, the 10, even the 15-year-olds? What things that need to start changing so that those young lads won't turn into men of our age, where the greatest risk to their life is suicide?
Write to your local MP, ask them what they're doing for youth clubs, boxing societies, libraries, sports centres, leisure centres, or what are they doing to open those spaces back up. I think London's lost about 25% of its youth clubs in the past 10 or so years. That's massive. And knife crime has gone up by almost the exact same amount, which I don't think is a coincidence. we talk so often about what boys do when they're up to no good, but we never give them anything better to do. Like Boy Scouts is disappearing, youth clubs are disappearing, boxing society is really, really powerful. They're disappearing. So write to your local MP and ask them why they're not being supported, or support one yourself, or open one yourself. Like there are so many amazing men that follow me that as a result of my account and others have decided I'm going to set up a hiking group. I'm going to set up my own sort of men's sheds or allotment or whatever else. And even not necessarily that, you can still text a mate. How you doing? It doesn't have to be a formal organised event. It could just be a greater effort to reach out to men in your lives. And as for boys, which you asked about, I just think a more concerted effort from men, particularly to be positive role models to young men and especially boys in their life. Like it's sad where it's so often vilified again. Like I get a lot of dads who can't even play their own child in the park because they're getting so many dirty looks from people suspicious of them. So there's work to be done from society to not be so inherently suspicious of men when they're around children, because we need those men to be role models to those children, free of the fear of public sort of accusations. So there's lots of work we can do, but giving men more space and empathy to tell you what they're experiencing of any age is surely a good thing.
George, thank you so much for joining me today. I've loved our conversation, hearing your take on things, and I'm sure people listening is probably, I'm hoping it's got them thinking, okay, do we need to adjust how we view men? Do we need to adjust what goes on in society? And yeah, just at least, I guess, encouraging the conversation. You know, I was going to say starting, but you've started it. Let's encourage it amongst society.
Just listen to it. We're just trying to do it about reacting in a way that so often people do, which is like knee-jerk projection. Like the data speaks for itself. Like using education as an example, boys are now further behind in higher education in America than women were 50 years ago. So this metaphorical pendulum where women were, about 30% of US colleges were women sort of going to them. Now it's swung and now it's 60%, and the men and the boys are behind. So we've not closed the gap. It's actually gotten bigger, but it's switched. It's inverted in terms of education. So what that requires is us updating our worldview and challenging ourselves to new ideas, where maybe to be a man and boy isn't excellent in every single area of life, and maybe there are ways in which they are disadvantaged in significant structural ways that we need to talk about, and urgently. So yeah, I would encourage anyone to visit my page and have a read of what I post, and not just me, of course, like I said, everything in moderation, and just to widen your political palate and taste. And like I said, the pick and mix, have a few cola bottles, have a few chocolate mice, have a few. Thing is, that's such poor advice to me because I actually only have chocolate fizzy cola bottles. Like I just love them. But a bit more variety, I think, was the message I would like to leave people with, especially in politics, where we need that detail and that nuance more than ever.
Yeah. George, thank you so much. Enjoy the rest of your day. And thank you once again for sharing your message with me.
It's been a pleasure. Thanks for having me. We'll speak again soon, I hope.
Thank you for tuning in to this episode of the Balanced Ambition podcast. I genuinely hope the stories inspire you as much as they inspire me. If you found value in today's conversation, please share it with a friend. And remember, by subscribing, you won't miss an episode, and it would truly mean the world to me. Stay balanced, and I'll see you next time.